I'm Kaelyn Moore, and once again, welcome to my attic. Today, I want to talk about a terrifying event that's been making the rounds on social media. So, on Friday, June 14th, 28 people got stuck on the AtmosFEAR Ride at Oakes Amusement Park in Portland, Oregon. I saw someone describe the place as bigger than a traveling carnival, but smaller than most permanent amusement parks. Now, I want to show you the videos and talk about some of the responses to it, but I also want to talk about amusement park safety and why it's the Wild West in general. But first, if you have a dark curiosity, you should like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a dark video of my creation. Now, the atmosphere is a pretty basic type of ride. You can see a picture of it here. It's what's known as a frisbee, and Coasterpedia defines a frisbee as a pendulum-based ride. It consists of a ring of seats attached to one end of an arm, which is attached to a pivot on the other end. The ring of seats spin as the arm swings. Frisbee rides exist with both inward and outward facing seats, and some are capable of fully inverting riders. That last part is key because the atmosphere was capable of fully inverting riders, and those riders were fully inverted when the ride got stuck. This is what the ride was supposed to look like. Many of you have probably been on a ride like this. I've been on them, and I definitely didn't throw up when I went on it. I did. Anyways, they're all over the place, but this is what the atmosphere looked like on Friday afternoon.
All right, update. They're still up there. It's been about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more, and they've just been hanging up there this whole time.
And they're just sitting up there.
We just asked the lady at the bottom of the Ferris wheel if this has ever happened before, and she said no, and she said she's actually concerned for them. Oh, they just said Oakes Park. They just said the park is closed.
Oh my God.
Jesus Christ.
So people on social media were reacting to this video in real time. Like one user says, "That's a fatal position." And yes, hanging upside down for too long can actually kill you. It would take several hours to do, but blood would start pooling in your brain, and it would be really hard for oxygen to make it to all of your organs, leading to possible asphyxiation. Also, it's just really uncomfortable. And another user said, "Closing the park so there isn't any witnesses if something goes south." Not gonna lie, that would be my first thought as well. Like, oh, of course they don't want several hundred people standing around filming. And then someone else says, how do modern rides not have redundant safety mechanisms that slowly bring the ride to its resting position at detection of any failure, not freeze in place? Oh my God. That is a great question, and one I'm actually going to talk about in a couple of minutes. But first, I want to break down exactly what happened. So the ride got stuck at around 2:55 p.m., and personnel call 911 and emergency responders get there at 3:20. That's about 25 minutes later, while the staff is trying to clear the park out. So everyone is up there for nearly half an hour, and as time goes on, the situation and understandably their reaction gets more dire. People are crying, people are screaming. If it was me personally, I would be throwing up. I imagine every minute must have felt like an hour when you're upside down. It's just really uncomfortable. There's all this weight on your shoulders and your organs, and you have all the blood rushing to your head. And then you have to be thinking, okay, are these restraints actually going to hold me in, or am I just going to fall to my death? And then you hear the announcement that they're clearing the park. Like, there's no way that makes you feel any better. I mean, this was the scene as people were evacuating the park.
This is terrifying. They're still up there.
I don't know if they had any communication from the staff other than what they heard on the PA system, but if you're up there and you're hearing, okay, everyone, let's leave immediately, that doesn't feel like a good sign. They don't close the park when everything works out fine. Thankfully, once emergency personnel got in the park, the maintenance people were able to lower everyone to the ground. Now, according to people in the parking lot, this was not a gentle move. The pendulum just sort of dropped. It kind of went like, so I guess maybe they could have done that sooner, but didn't want to do it without the emergency services there. That makes sense to me. So the good news, actually the great news, is that out of all 28 people, only one person on the ride had to go to the hospital. Everyone else just got to go home because they weren't injured. But part of this could have been because most of the people on the ride were kids and teenagers. It was the last day of school for a lot of teens in the area, so everyone had come out to celebrate. You can imagine if it was not as young and healthy of a population, things might have turned out totally differently. I actually want to look at a clip of the one kid who did go to the hospital.
Gravity was pulling me down, but the seat was keeping me in, so everything was pressuring me against like the harness that was coming over me. So I can still feel soreness in my arms and my hips from that.
Okay, so the first time I watched this video, I could definitely tell how traumatized he looked by everything, but I also felt like he looked like this nice, freckly kid until you realize that those aren't freckles. They're broken blood vessels from the force of spending half an hour hanging upside down. Needless to say, the AtmosFEAR ride is now closed until further notice.
What?
Now, as I was reading the internet's horrified reaction to this, I noticed a comment on the original Chris Ryan video from a TikTok user named Sleepy. And Sleepy said, "Fun fact, this happened to me at a place called Dreamworld in Australia. It has the same ride. I was young, but quite tall, so passed the height test." I saw this and immediately Googled Dreamworld Australia stuck upside down, and I found this. So you can definitely see that these people are stuck and they're a little bit upside down. So a sensor on the ride sensed something that was wrong and actually stopped the coaster in its tracks, leaving guests stuck for around 30 minutes before they were safely let down. But as you no doubt noticed, this is a very different kind of ride. It's not a frisbee or a pendulum, though Dreamworld does have one of those, and it's called the Claw. It's not exactly the same as the AtmosFEAR. They're both by different manufacturers, but they're generally the same idea. However, I couldn't find any record of the Claw, which opened in September of 2004, ever getting stuck upside down. But I did find one really interesting exchange from 2008 in the Parks forum. Basically, a bunch of users were asking if anyone had ever gotten stuck, and someone asked, can the ride stop on an angle when emergency stopped, or does it just go back to the starting position? And someone says, I'd imagine it would come back down to ground level, as there would be little point in having people up in the air in the event of an emergency. Yeah, I would also imagine it would come back down to the ground level so people wouldn't be hanging there in the event of an emergency. But apparently that's not how it works, or at least that's not how it worked on AtmosFEAR. But believe it or not, none of these were the first things that came up when I was searching for Dreamworld accidents. No, the first story was this: 4 people killed on a water ride in October of 2016. So 4 adults died in October of 2016 when their raft crashed into another and overturned, crushing them. The park later admitted to breaching safety laws, even though they were mildly inconvenient and inexpensive. Which brings us full circle to this comment on the original TikTok. How do modern rides not have redundant safety mechanisms? Why is it so easy to find amusement park accidents? I've covered these types of accidents on my podcast before with Disney Deaths Part 1 and 2, and last week I just did an episode on amusement park accidents as part of our Dark Summer series. Turns out there's no lack of amusement park accidents for me to cover. And part of what I learned in doing that is that there is, at least in the United States and in many other countries, no governing body at all that sets standards for rides or attractions at amusement parks. None.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
In America, it's left up to the states, and the states don't really have any resources to do this. So many states pass the responsibility of policing amusement parks off to insurance companies. They're just told to check if the ride's in good condition and is following the manufacturer's instructions. There's also no rules for who can even make a ride. In the case of 10-year-old Caleb Schwab, who was killed when his inner tube flew off of a water slide, the person in charge of making rides wasn't an engineer or even a physicist. He was a hobbyist, and he tested his ride with sandbags, which are not people. Tragically, people die as a result of this. Not in the case of the AtmosFEAR, thankfully, but you don't want to have to be lucky when you go on a ride. We deserve better, honestly. You shouldn't have to rely on an insurance agent taking the word of a non-engineer who took the word of a teen ride operator to feel safe. This feels like a government agency people would actually want to work for, too. Setting rules and regulations and inspecting rides seems way better than, I don't know, working for the IRS. Anyways, have you ever experienced something like this? It seems like it's way more common than any of us realized. That's all I have for you today, though. And until next time, stay safe.